can do it.
All right. So this is note card number 68. The title is Arc Length. So arc length is the distance it would be if you walked along the arc. Arc length is the distance it would be if you walked along the arc. So let's draw two circles, one kind of smallish, and then the other one larger. And then I'm going to draw two angles, and I'm going to try to make them the same size. So that's 80 degrees. And then this one is 80 also. When the angle is at the center of the circle, what's it called? What kind of an angle is it? It's called a central angle. So this is a central angle because the vertex is at the center of the circle. And this is a central angle because the vertex is at the center of the circle. So we got two central angles, and they're both 80. All right, now if you started here and walked along the curved part is the arc, right? So if you walked along the curved part over to here, and then over here, if you walked along that curved part, which one is longer? The one on the right is longer, clearly, right? So this is a shorter length than that. The length is the distance it would be if you walked. So that's shorter than that. So I'm going to call this A and B, and this C and D. So the length of AB how many inches it would be if you walked that. The length of AB is less than the length of CD. The notation is kind of hard to get used to, but the concept's not tough. It's obvious that this length is shorter than that length, right? So I'm just trying to get you used to what length means and how to write that down. So you write the length of arc AB. Okay, but then yesterday we talked about the measure of AB. So that's different. When there's a little m in front of it, it's called measure instead of length. So this is the measure of the arc as opposed to the length of the arc. And the measure is how many degrees it is. So what's the measure of this arc? How's it going? Thank you. So what's the measure of that arc? 80 degrees. What's the measure of this arc? 80 degrees. So the measures are equal because they're both 80 degrees. So the measure is how many degrees it is, and the length is how many inches it is. So this length is shorter than that length, but this measure is equal to that measure. Everybody okay with that? All right, and then there's a formula that goes on this note card. The measure of the central angle divided by 360 equals the arc length divided by the circumference. Okay, so that's it for note cards today. You guys can just say we have tons of notes today, not nearly as many. So the paper is called Geometry 9-2. And there's a circle that goes, you don't have to draw this circle, we're just all going to look at it. All right, so there's the picture we're looking at. And for 1A, it wants to know the measure of arc TR. So if you start at T and go on the curved part to R, that's arc TR. And it's asking for the measure of it. So that's how many degrees it is. So how many degrees is it all the way around? 360, right? So how many degrees is it here? 180. Good, because that's half the way around. So TR in this particular picture happens to be half of the circle. That's called a semicircle, right? We learned that term yesterday. So this is a semicircle. And so since it's half the circle, that means it's 180 degrees. Because all the way around is 360. Okay, so the measure of TR is 180 degrees. Okay, but then part B wants to know the length of TR. And that's asking for how many inches it is, not how many degrees it is, but how many inches it is. Okay, before we can figure out the length of TR, we need to know the length all the way around the circle. So how do you find the length all the way around the circle? What is that called, the length all the way around? Yeah, it's called the circumference. Good. So what's the formula for circumference? Yeah.
2 times pi times 30.
Awesome. So circumference is 2 pi r. So we're just going to take 2 times pi times whatever the radius is. So we're figuring out how many inches it is all the way around the circle. So this information is important. It says that from T to R is 12 inches. So if you go from T to R straight across, it's 12 inches. So what's that called? What's that line called? Good, that line's called the diameter. So then we need the radius. So how big is the radius? Awesome. So 12, they told us the diameter was 12, so the radius is 6. So that means in our circumference formula, we're going to take 2 times pi times 6. So that comes out to 12 pi. So that's about 36. I mean, pi doesn't exactly equal 3. But that means it's 36 inches or so all the way around the circle. It's the circumference. Okay, so then what we're really shooting for is the length of TR, the half circle. So if it's 12 pi all the way around the circle, how far is it going to be from T to R? 6 pi, half of that, right? Because this is a semicircle. So if we write it down the fancy way, and we should, this is 180/360ths of the circle. It's half of the circle. And we want to know how much length it would be out of 12 pi. So this formula is just going with this formula from the note card. The central angle is 180, and the circumference is 12 pi. And what I'm looking for is the arc length. But the idea is that since TR is half the circle, then we want to take half of the circumference to get the length of it. So we can do this one in our head. So we can just know that that's supposed to be 6 pi, right? Because 6 pi is half of 12 pi. So the idea is that this is half, 180 out of 360. And so this should be half, 6 pi out of 12 pi. All right, for number 2, it wants to know the measure of TG. So now we're changing, and we're looking at a different arc. Now we're looking at TG. So what's the measure of TG? What's the measure of this angle?
21 degrees.
This one's 21, so TG is 21, right? Because the measure is how many degrees it is. So generally the measure is not a tough question. So the measure of the arc is the same as the central angle. So since that's 21, then that means that's 21. Okay, so then if we want to know the length, so that's what T2b asks for, the length of TG. So the measure is how many degrees it is, and the length is how many inches it is. So last time, the fraction was easy to deal with because it was 180/360ths, aka 1/2. But this one, the fraction is going to be a little tougher. It's 21/360ths. So this is not going to be as convenient for our brains because we're all good at a half, but we're not as good at 21/360ths. But it's still the same concept. Okay, so if it's 12 pi all the way around this circle, then to figure out this part, we just need to figure out 21/360ths of the 12 pi. So 21/360ths of the 12 pi. So again, this one's tougher because when we could do 1/2, we just knew it was going to be 6 pi compared to 12 pi. But 21 out of 360, we can't do that in our heads. So that's why we're setting up the proportion. And then you can do the cross products. Whenever you solve a proportion, you take 21 times 12 pi, and then 360 times x. So 360 times x, I can do that one. 21 times 12, I need the calculator for that. Oh, thank you. So that other cross product will be 252 pi. So I just took this times this, there's that, and then that times that. And then we're trying to figure out what x is, so we're going to divide the 360 over. So that comes out to 0.7 pi, if I remember right. It's only been half an hour since first bell, but better double check. It's 0.7, right? So I'd just take 252 divided by 360. Am I okay, Emma? Thank you very much. Is everybody doing okay with this answer? All right. So now for number 3, we're going to look at the measure of ATR. So this time I'm going to go from A through T to R. What kind of an arc is that called if it's really big like that? It's called a major arc. If we went the short way, it would be a minor arc. But since we're going the long way, it's a major arc. Okay, so how many degrees is it from A to T to R? Well, how many degrees is it all the way around? 360. And then how many degrees is this? 90. So if we just take 360 minus 90, then that'll tell us this part. This one's 90. So this is 360 minus 90. So 270. Everybody okay with 270? So then if we're going to find the length of ATR, it's 270 3/60ths of the circle, aka 3/4. 90 degrees is 1/4 of the circle, so what's left is 3/4 of the circle. So we've got 3/4 of the 12 pi. So to solve that, you take that times that, and then divide. It'll come out to 9 pi. So that means it's about 27 inches. Pi is about 3, not exactly 3, but it's about 27 inches. If you started here at A and walked along here to get to here, it's about 27 inches to do that.